Well, hello everybody, the History Guy here. Gonna dive in and check out a new mod today. I think I've played this at some point in the past, but it's been a long time, so consider this kind of a first look and a bit of a review of the Hearts of Iron 4 mod, End of a New Beginning. Starts in 1857, says it goes to 2050. So let's check this one out a little bit and see exactly what it's like. So we're coming into the middle of the Victorian era. Queen Victoria took the throne about 20 years before this over the UK. Of course, the Prime Minister at this time in the UK is Lord Palmerston. The United States has James Buchanan, one of our worst presidents. Also our only bachelor president, the only one who never married. French Empire under Napoleon III, who was a nephew of Emperor Napoleon I. We've got the Kingdom of Prussia. We've got the Russian Empire, Tsar Alexander II, Austria under Franz Joseph I. We've got the Qing Empire over there in China, and we've got others. So for the sake of this one, I'm going to take on the United States and James Buchanan because I want to actually take on the role of the South in the Civil War for reviewing this mod. So you see we have the U.S., you've got the Sioux Nation, the Nez Perce, the Cheyenne. There were other tribes here, but the U.S. kind of claimed a lot of that territory. So let's just go ahead and dive into this thing. All right, so right off the bat, welcome to the End of a New Beginning. This mod attempts to simulate our world from 1857 onwards. Although it's still an early alpha age and bugs can sometimes happen. Just basically the obligatory, hey, here's what's going on with this mod. And I want a summary of mod progress. Let me see the credits. Understood. Here we go. No custom music, only because we're not going to be listening to the music anyway. So let's go ahead and take a look at national focus. Very cool. We've definitely got some time-appropriate and nation-appropriate national focuses. Now, for me, any good mod begins right here. If they just have the standard vanilla national focuses, I'm usually not too interested in the mod. So if you get that part right, I can be pretty forgiving of a lot of other things. So let's take a look at some of these. The American Civil War, which we can't use that one because it hasn't erupted. So this is all a national focus that cannot be chosen until the American Civil War actually happens. Panic of 1857 triggers this tree to be opened up. Buchanan presidency, which of course we have right now, can open up these things. And then we have the Reconstruction era, which of course took place after the Civil War. So very, very cool stuff happening here. So I guess we choose Buchanan presidency. So here's where it's going to get interesting. Oh, I love the images here. So all the factories and things like that actually have more age, like time period appropriate images. So that's pretty cool too. So I'm actually going to start queuing up some civilian factories and things. Actually, I think infrastructure first. Down in the South. So it's kind of a cheating thing that I'm going to do here, but I want to start getting the South prepped to be in a better technological position for when this war breaks out. So I'm not going to do anything to help the North, is basically what I'm saying. I'm not going to do anything as far as building up the military, because I don't want to give the North any advantage by allowing them to have any of that military power going in. So that's kind of where things stand. We're going to just go ahead and let this sim out and see what events transpire as we move along. All right, May of 1857, lots of things happening. Our peacetime economy is working like a well-oiled machine, and we are making profits on every end, it seems. Focusing on peaceful industrial buildup has paid off for us. That's great, so we get a minor economic boom. There are some wars happening around the world that have kind of been triggering as we go along here. But things going along nicely, and not really much to report about right now. Let's take a look real quick at the research slots, because I didn't do that before. So those are also very appropriate to the time period. And there's a lot of them, actually. We've got aviation, which, of course, right now means balloons and not much else. Socioeconomics and humanities. This is kind of interesting. So we've got mercantilism, industrial society. Very cool. They've really done their work on this. Obviously, there's no nuclear research to be done, electrics and instruments. So we've got things like Volta's battery, Woolrich electrical generator, early alternators. This is really cool. I'm liking this so far. Biochemistry, we've got polymer chemistry, volar synthesis. We get into things like hygiene, early medicine, germ theory, pasteurization. Excellent stuff. So, man, you can seriously make some huge changes that affect the game through the research on this one. Inorganic chemistry, let's go ahead and do that. We've got refining. Mechanical engineering has things like steam locomotive, high-speed steam engine, interchangeable parts, coreless steam engine. There's air doctrine, but that doesn't really mean a whole lot right now because we are far from the place where we're going to actually be talking about those things. So naval doctrine, Victorian navies first. Let's take a look at the actual naval research we can do here. We've got 1812 sloops, so we're way behind on the Navy. We've got a long way to go to get caught up there. Land doctrine, Victorian Army takes us into things like artillery support, traditional Army, industrial buildup, innovative thinking. Very cool, very cool. All right, artillery, Congreve rocket. We've got the 12-pound howitzer. That would be, for example, Napoleon's are right there. 10-pounder Parrots. We get into a 200-pounder Parrot rifle. That's crazy huge. The hail rockets were something that happened during the Civil War. Let's take a look at the differences. I'm just curious because I thought I remember seeing some of there really wasn't a difference. So production cost is 70, 1, 3, and 5. Half. So production cost is down for a 12-pounder Napoleon, but it looks like for the most part, the actual stats of it are exactly the same. So I'm not entirely sure exactly what there is to be gained by one versus the other because it looks like they're identical in every single way. So I guess we'll just stick with the 6-pounders for now. Armor, not really armor except for armored train experiments. Support companies, I guess I should go ahead and let it sim while I'm doing all this. And then infantry, we've got things like hand revolvers, we've got the mini rifle, 1850s uniforms. What do we got down here? Transport horses, mounted infantry, so basically like dragoons. Springfield rifles right here. Improved percussion caps, standardized handguns. All right, so that's kind of just a real quick overview of the beginning technologies that are available to be researched. Guess I'll go ahead and just choose a few more things. I'm not sure how many of these I actually get to keep when I become the Confederacy. All right, we've got our first decision here, the slavery debate. The issue of slavery has lingered as long as the United States has been. Our founding fathers could not solve the issue, nor the generation after that. All they have done is pass the torch of the slave issue to us, and the tensions of slavery are starting to boil. That's definitely an accurate view of how things were going down. So we can say, so what? We can push for the status quo, which is going to drop stability, which we know was happening. We can pick a side, and we can try for compromise. So let's go ahead and push for status quo for now, because that's kind of what was happening. I guess we'll just go down the Buchanan presidency tree, because that's really the only place we can go with the national focus right now. All right, this was a big deal in the history of the United States at this time and place. Uncle Tom's Cabin. Although released back in 1852, the book Uncle Tom's Cabin has grown more and more popular as the years go by. The book featured the character Uncle Tom, a long-suffering black slave, and the novel shows the horrible truths of slavery while also asserting that Christian love can overcome something as destructive as slavery. They gave the book much praise in the North, but led to the outrage in the slave-heavy South. So no matter what I do, it appears the same. Loss of political power of 25. So I guess I'm not sure if it really matters what I choose there, except for it to just say what happens. So we no longer have the effects of the minor economic boom. Let's take a look. What else do we have here? All right, let's choose steam locomotive 1. We're into September 1857. Things are moving along nicely. but we're really just waiting for 1860 so we can see what happens. All right, so this is not far from me. I'm only about an hour away from where this happened. I know the town of Oil City very well, which is right near there. August 28th, 1859, George Bissell and Edwin Drake completed the Drake Well in Titusville, Pennsylvania. It would become the first successful usage of an oil rig on a well that was specifically drilled to produce oil. Instead of drilling for salt water and removing the oil, had originally been a byproduct of making the salted water drinkable. However, with the increasing demand for oil to be used for candles and lamps to light up homes, the Drake Well signaled that the petroleum industry would become a major industry on the world market. So Pennsylvania adds 80 oil production in Pennsylvania. So now we have the Pennsylvania oil rush. So Oil City is right in this area right here of Pennsylvania. In fact, one of my ancestors, who actually was a sergeant in the 4th Pennsylvania Cavalry during the Civil War, his name was Daniel Serby. His name's on the monument at Gettysburg, along with all the other soldiers from Pennsylvania who served. He actually was there dressing oil well tools. He was a blacksmith, and he got to be a part of that boom. So kind of cool little piece of history that my family's a part of. So this is cool. George Washington Parke Custis, Virginia plantation owner, died at the ripe old age of 79. Although not biologically related, he was adopted by Martha and George Washington. That's not entirely true. He was actually Martha Washington's grandson, biological grandson. So he was adopted by George Washington, but he was biologically Martha Washington's grandson. He also was the father-in-law of Robert E. Lee, and it was he that passed along Arlington to the Lee family. The Compromise of 1850 and the Fugitive Slave Act. So in 1850, in order to deal with the new territory from the Mexican-American War, the United States... Oh, I guess I lost that. So I guess I should have paused there. So Fugitive Slave Act, Compromise of 1850, all had to do with... the major issue leading up to the American Civil War was the expansion of slavery to the new territories in the West. As those territories were admitted as states, they had to make a decision about whether or not they would be free states or allow slavery. And it was all about balance of power. And so there was this constant argument over that. And the Compromise of 1850, if I remember right, basically said that, okay, these territories down here can have it, these ones up here can't. Each territory could kind of decide for themselves if they wanted slavery. Historically speaking, you had slavery all the way up to the Ohio River in the American before the American Civil War. So this was all Virginia. I live right up in this area. I can get to the northern part of what is now West Virginia in about 45 minutes from where I live. So you basically had a slave state, and at the beginning of the Civil War, the Confederacy stretched all the way to within about a half-hour drive of Pittsburgh and about an hour and 20 minutes of Cleveland, right up in here. Of course, West Virginia broke off and became part of the Union. But you had slavery here in Kentucky, you had it in Missouri, and of course out here into the West. And Kansas was where a lot of the fighting before the Civil War happened. They called it Bleeding Kansas because of all the fighting that was happening over the issue of slavery. So we're just going to keep working on military things here for now. We're almost into 1858. All right, so here's part of where I'm going to do a little bit of cheating almost, since I'm going to take the South. We're going to go ahead and start focusing on Southern focus after we complete specie payments. We're going to start focusing on building up the South. So we're going to add a bunch of Texas plantations, Southern military industry, and we're going to focus that way, as well as I continue to build up the infrastructure in the South. It's taken a long time because infrastructure is expensive, and I don't have a lot of free factories to do that with. But I'm going to do everything I can to get myself in a position where by 1861, the South stands a fighting chance. All right, I want to take a look at something here right after I go ahead and choose Southern focus for the industry, and that is the decisions that can be made here. I want to take a look at those for a second. Mainly, I want to take a look. You can advance to the machine era anytime after 1885. And you have to have certain technologies completed in order to be able to do that. So you have to make those advancements. You can pursue the dream of flight. So I guess what that does is it actually is going to unlock additional research trees that aren't available right now. You can also, in religious affairs, convert to Catholicism as a country, start to secularize the United States. That costs 750 in national focus points, or those political power. You can also admit various various what are now territories to the Union. So I love that. And as far as the available choices to make, there just really is a lot of replayability factor to this mod because there's so many different directions you could go. And this is just one country. I'm very curious to see what some of the other countries have available to them. And probably near the end of this, once I get to the American Civil War and just kind of look at what that looks like, I may jump over and look at a few of the other nations and what they have to offer as well. So as I mentioned, Bleeding Kansas, here we go. Introduced by Stephen Douglas in 1854, the Kansas-Nebraska Act allowed for the people of Kansas and Nebraska territories to choose if they wanted slavery or not. This led many northern abolitionists and southern pro-slavers to move to Kansas. John Brown was one of them, who of course was very prominent in the time leading up to the Civil War. So again, no matter what we do, it ends up with a hit to political power. So the reason that was a big deal is because it kind of violated the compromise, that Missouri Compromise, the compromise whereby it was going to be held, slavery was held in check to the south and not allowed up in the north, because Nebraska, of course, is up further north. So all of it was kind of a big deal at the time, and all led to the eventual American Civil War that happened a couple years later. All right, the Dred Scott decision was a Supreme Court case, cleared up on March 6, 1857. The result ruled that Dred Scott, who resided in a free state, it was Illinois, I think, was not entitled to his freedom, and that African Americans could not be citizens of the United States. The outrage of it in the North, the ruling has not died down and has increased in intensity with the ongoing debate over slavery. I believe they basically ruled that Dred Scott had no standing to sue in court since he was not a citizen. But again, that was just one more thing that kind of led to this buildup that eventually resulted in South Carolina seceding after Abraham Lincoln's election in 1860. The Lincoln-Douglas Debates. As 1858 rolls around, congressional positions are now held up in state elections. One particular election is the Senate election in Illinois. Democrat Senator Stephen Douglas seeks re-election in Illinois, but he's challenged by a politician named Abraham Lincoln. Famously, Abraham Lincoln delivered his House Divided speech and exemplified the disunity that slavery has brought to the nation. Although Lincoln would lose and Stephen would get another term as senator, the Lincoln-Douglas debates brought him nationwide attention. Of course, then that politician has potential. They again ran against each other 2 years later when Abraham Lincoln was selected to be the second ever Republican Party nominee for president. The Republican Party first ran for president in 1856, and John Fremont was the nominee at that point, and Abraham Lincoln was actually the vice presidential nominee at that time. And of course, 4 years later, then he becomes the presidential nominee for president and wins. All right, there's Southern military industry. I'm continuing to work down this national focus. We're going to Southern Seas now. And to correct something I said earlier, Abraham Lincoln was not the vice presidential nominee in 1856 for the Republicans, though he received significant support to be that nominee. They actually eventually went with William Dayton instead, but that got him kind of the national profile that eventually led to him getting the nomination 4 years later for president. We're going to add one cotton farm. So I'm continuing to build up Southern industry, which should put me in a better position to be competitive in the war when it comes. Building up the infrastructure, and then I've started to queue up a few civilian factories as well. So hopefully that gets me somewhere competitive with the North as far as industry goes. So just to continue on, there's actually another whole set of national focuses available down here. It goes a long way from all the way up here with the Reconstruction era. You can see all the amendments of the Constitution. Just a ton of options available, readmitting the southern states to the Union. And down here we've got the integration plan, which allows you to choose either Republicans or Democrats. You can kind of build up things in the South. In the Civil War, you've got different plans available. The Ulysses plan, the Sherman plan, the McClellan plan, the Meade plan. So, man, there's just so many options. I'm really impressed by the depth of what is available on the American focus tree. I'm curious to see what that looks like for the South, and that'll probably be the last thing I do in reviewing this mod, at least for this video. I'm not going to play out the whole thing. At some point, if you guys are interested, I may do a series playing through this mod, but right now I'm just trying to give you some of the highlights. So we'll go ahead and let it go to the American Civil War and just see what's available to the South as far as that goes, as far as national focus goes when the war breaks out. So I was looking over this tree a little more on the national focus, and this one here, the integration plan, is only possible if you avoid the American Civil War. It says that this one happens if Stephen A. Douglas manages to avert a civil war. So I would assume I'm going to get the choice on who I allow to win the presidential election in 1860. It was Abraham Lincoln, Stephen Douglas, and I believe John Breckinridge, who was actually a cousin of Mary Todd Lincoln and who was a former vice president of the U.S. So they split the Southern Democrat vote, which was what opened up the door for Lincoln to win the election with something like 40% of the votes. So I'm guessing I'm going to get that same choice, but we're going to choose to allow the Civil War to happen just so I can see that kind of play out a little bit. So one more thing to look at while we're waiting for the Civil War events to unfold, and that is the differences that exist with the choices you have to use those political PowerPoints on now. Obviously, the U.S. doesn't have much political power right now because of the lack of stability and everything else that's happening right now. But in the event you have political power, you can change your state religion to atheist, secular, theocratic. You can change your education choices. There's demographic policies, of course, conscription laws, population growth policies. You can change your suffrage laws to allow women the right to vote, for example. Some of those things are really super expensive, though. So it's not like you're going to be making quick changes to your situation. I could actually abolish slavery, give full equality, but of course, not having the political power, I can't replace that. It says I can't do it anyway. Obviously, we have to wait for those other events to unfold. Border laws. So there's a lot available here. Elections, how you do the elections, whether or not you have a constitution, technological eras. You can go all the way to the atomic era. Since this allows you to go well into the year 2000s, there's just a lot to this. So this could really make for a really interesting, long-lasting series. All right, there's John Brown's raid. Well-known radical abolitionist John Brown has launched a raid on the United States in Harpers Ferry, Virginia, raided a U.S. arsenal in order to initiate an armed slave revolt. Thankfully, Colonel Robert E. Lee and his men were able to defeat Brown's part of 22 and retake the arsenal. He was able to capture 7, including John Brown, where 10 were killed and fled. 5 fled before being captured. No matter what I do, it has the same hit on my political power. I believe John Brown's son was one of those who was killed during that raid. Of course, Brown was hanged not long afterwards. One more thing that led down the road to Civil War. All right, we're getting closer. It's May of 1860. The political parties on slavery, the Republican parties, announced they have nominated Illinois politician Abraham Lincoln, who wishes for slavery not to be expanded west. Southern Democrats have elected John Breckinridge, current vice president under Buchanan, who supports expansion of slavery to the west, while Northern Democrats chose Stephen Douglas as a moderate on the issue. So you have the 3 different positions, one against expansion of slavery, one for it, and one who is a moderate, kind of towing the line in the middle. All right, here it is, the election of 1860. We do, in fact, get to choose, so we're going to choose Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln elected president. We're a little early. It's only September of 1860, so it's not exactly when it happened, but I turned down the graphics, if you're wondering, just to make it sim a little faster so I could get through this. So we'll see what events now unfold. We'll probably see South Carolina secede first, and then all the cotton states or the Deep South seceded. North Carolina, Virginia, And I believe Arkansas did not, or maybe Tennessee did not secede until after what happened at Fort Sumter and Lincoln called for volunteers. All right, here we go. The South secedes. With the results of the election, there has been a large eruption of disunity in the United States, primarily the issue of slavery, which divided the nation so much. Although Lincoln did not want to end slavery entirely, only limit it, this caused enough fear in the South. Because of this, representatives from the southern states have declared their independence. For Dixie, here we go. South Carolina declares independence. I would expect we're going to start seeing the other states follow suit. Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Louisiana, Texas, Arkansas, Tennessee, eventually North Carolina, Georgia, or Virginia, Arkansas. Some of those are going to happen late, like in the springtime. But that's where we're at. We are now the Confederate States of America under Jefferson Davis, who was a senator from Mississippi, also had been the head of the West Point Military Academy at one time. Let's go ahead and look at our national focus tree now. We've only got one. I would guess if we end up winning the war, it'll go back to the other tree again, or at least parts of it. We're going to proclaim the new nation. After that, it gives us retake Fort Sumter, Dixie to arms, and that will actually declare the war against the United States. So let's go ahead and watch a little bit more of this play out before we wrap this up. All right, there we have it. Mississippi joins the Confederacy. Welcome, Mississippi. Welcome, Alabama. Florida has entered the Confederacy. Welcome, Georgia. So they're dropping like flies now. And, of course, let's see how many. The civilian factories are at 3 right now. The South just did not have a lot of manufacturing at all. So I'm not the least bit surprised by this. We do have a lot of military factories, though, which is helpful. I did try to queue up as many of those as I possibly could. Only 3 of those, too. It looks like 3 research slots available. Division designers there, so we're going to have to start building up an army at some point. But we'll have those couple of decisions that happen here fairly soon. We're still going to see Texas, I think, join pretty quickly. All of the things that I had researched as the United States are also available to me here, so that's good news. Any research you do as the U.S. Kind of sets you up for success then as the South. So something to think about if you do play this out. There's Texas. So we're now up to volunteers for the Confederacy. Many soldiers from the Union defect to us and join our noble cause. So now we've got an army for the first time. I want to take a look real quick at the situation now as far as we've got 8 civilian factories now and still 3 military factories. Not a lot. We've got to get these last 4 states. So a lot of these places become demilitarized zones. So this is basically right here. You can see it highlighted. Those are the neutral states, the states that didn't really take sides. Now, Arkansas, Tennessee, Virginia, North Carolina do take sides when Lincoln calls for volunteers to suppress what he called the rebellion in the South. So that's what's going to lead to those states coming on my side, depending on what decisions the North end up making. All right, so we proclaimed the new nation of the Confederacy. Next, of course, is to take Fort Sumter, which it doesn't appear. Here we go. Now it's going to let me do it. Demand the fort be ceded. So I guess we're going to automatically make that one happen. No, now it frees that one up to happen. So we'll see. I'm just going to let this play out a little bit more just to see how this all goes down. But then I'm going to drop out. I'm not making this a full series that I'm playing. I just kind of wanted to preview and review the game a little bit. And then we're going to take a brief look at just a couple of the other nations and what their trees look like as far as their decisions for national focus. So we'll let this play out into April, see what happens, and then we'll move on. All right, so it's April, and more states have joined the Confederacy. The Union stands firm. So it looks like war has actually been declared. The Battle of Fort Sumter takes place. American Civil War has now happened. So at this point, now it's given me a bunch of political power, and we've got a couple of new free military factories because of Virginia, Tennessee, North Carolina, and Arkansas joining the Union. So now we have the historical Confederacy, as it existed. And, of course, now we've got some new things that are going to open up. We're going to stop it right there. Last thing I want to show you real quick with this one in mind is the available commanders that have been given to me as a Confederacy. We've got Albert Sidney Johnston, Braxton Bragg, Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson. Looks like Beauregard, though. All the pictures here of Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, Edmund Kirby Smith. Those are all pictures of Pierre Beauregard. Leonidas Polk, William Hardy, John Bell Hood. So that just shows you at least some of the commanders that are available there at the beginning. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump out, and we're just going to briefly take a look at a couple of other nations real quick just to see what some of those nations have in their decision trees. So real quick, we're going to take a look at Prussia and see what they have to offer as far as national focus goes. Very interesting. A lot, really just, again, so much depth to this mod as far as the decision trees that they have. You've got the economy right here that you can focus on. Lots of different things you can do here to work on the economy. You've got the Prussian army, and you can focus on that quite a bit. Let's look at diplomatic settings. Elections of 1858. You've got a mobilization of the army, a new era, and obviously there's probably some things to do with unifying Germany. You've got Bismarck's cabinet here, an abdication of the king, and putting Otto von Bismarck in power. You can go down the route of socialism, which gives you a bunch of options there. And New Germany here looks like that's probably going down the road of Prussian Republic. Okay, military supremacy. A lot of different things available. Research slot, probably all historic, but different weapons. So you have weapons that are more German rather than the ones that were in the American tree. So very cool. Again, a lot of different choices. Some of them are the same, which makes sense. So let's take a look at a couple of others. Maybe we'll look at the Russians, look at France, and see what they have. So looking at Russia, actually, it looks like maybe they were still working on this one or what. Not much there as far as Russia goes. Pretty vanilla as far as the tree goes. Not a lot there. You would very quickly run out of options on the national focus. So it seems like Russian Empire not really fully kind of fleshed out. You would have all of these options available to you, but you're not going to have a lot of options as far as the national focus trees go. And it looks like they pretty much have the same options in research as the Americans had. So we'll take a look at a few others, maybe Austria, France, and the United Kingdom. Same thing's true for Austria, pretty much just a vanilla national focus tree, not a lot of options there. I would guess research will be the same way. Slightly different, they've got the Lorenz rifles, so a few things are a little different there as far as the uniforms and the rifles go. But for the most part, again, not a lot there, not compared to the United States and Prussia and all that they have going for them. So let's look at France. Definitely a lot of options for the French Empire. We've got legislative elections of 1857. You get to decide the future of the empire, go liberal or authoritarian, and all the options that go along with that. Over here, we've got new public works, and this is infrastructure and dealing with poverty and wages and things like that. We've got foreign assets, a number of things as far as diplomacy goes. And then here, a ton of diplomatic options, external affairs, Europe, French colonial empire, a place on the American continent. You can get involved in the American Civil War, recognizing the CSA, Mexican intervention, which of course was something France did. Let's see if there's anything more down here. That's about it, but definitely a lot of depth to the way that you can go as France. So a lot more options there. Let's look at research slot. We've got the Enfield rifle, which is an English rifle, but a lot of things there. So there's just a little bit of tweaking that goes on, but the technology trees seem to be the same for most, just really names that change. So a little more depth with France. That's cool. We'll take a look at one more. We'll look at the United Kingdom and see what they have. So the UK, definitely a ton of depth here as well. So the Orsini affair, which was also in the trees for the French, parliamentary debacle. You've got Queen's intervention. It looks like you can go down the death of the prince. So that probably happens on its own, I would guess. You can keep Parliament, or you can go down the route of revolution. Question the Church of England, topple the Lords, people march on London. So you got socialism here this way. A lot of options as far as the direction of the country there. You've got a bunch here as well, and I'm sure there are a lot of decisions that deal with their overseas colonies, Australia, things like that, South Africa, expand the foreign ministry, British isolationism, again, getting involved, officially supporting the CSA. You can actually sell boats to the Confederates, the state of the Atlantic slave trade. You've got the Industrial Revolution over here. Nothing else down here, but a lot of options. So I would say, for the most part, at least of the nations that I looked at, you've got Prussia, France, the UK, and the United States that have really been fleshed out as far as the decisions that are available to you. There may be others, but those are kind of the main ones that I've looked at. So all in all, what I would say, in just having briefly reviewed this game a little bit, is that as far as mods go, this is one that has really had a lot of work put into it. And for me, any good mod, it has to begin with the options that are available to you as far as nations go, the events and how much those events have been fleshed out. Now, obviously, I haven't gotten into other nations, but as far as the United States goes, the events are somewhat played out, but it doesn't feel like the events give you a lot of options to determine the direction of your country. Basically, it seems like they were more there to tell you what was happening. There wasn't a huge difference, for example, between choosing one choice or the other for the Dred Scott decision. It felt like everything just happened the same way. So I'm a little disappointed in that, but it more than makes up for it with the national focus trees and all of the options. There's just a ton of replayability as far as the direction you can take your country. So that is a big plus to this mod. Some mods, basically, it's just window dressing. You know, you get to pick a country, but they all have this very vanilla kind of national focus tree and research tree. It doesn't feel that way with this. So those are good things. I wish they did more with the decision making as those events unfold. So that would be a negative for me. But all in all, as far as mods that go back to the 1800s with this game, I feel like this is one of the better ones that I've seen. At some point, I'll probably play a playthrough, a series on that one, but we'll see, because this goes all the way to 2050, it says, from 1857, so there's a lot to be played, and it feels like there could be a lot of depth to that. So let me know your thoughts, what you think. If I did do a series at some point, which country and which direction should I go with it? Right now, for those of you who are patrons, if you head on over to Patreon, or Patreon as some people pronounce it, I guess that makes sense. For anyone, even at $1 a month patrons, I have a poll question up right now about the next series that I'll do. So even if you join just at $1 a month, you can make that available to you. You can have some say-so in that. Also, you can use the comment section below here. I'm not making that something, oh, well, you know, if you don't pay me $1 a month, you can't have input. It's just something I made available to the patrons. But check that out. Let me know your thoughts on this mod, what you like, what you don't like out of what I've showed you, what you'd like to see in the future, and use the comment section below. Hit that like button if you want to see more reviews like this, more looks at mods and other games, and I'll try to do that as much as I can. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you again real soon.